Today, I want to pay tribute to Sarah Root, a young woman from Iowa who had a very bright future but was taken from this earth too soon. Sarah was 21 years old and just graduated from Bellevue University with perfect grades. In the words of her family, quote, "She was full of life and ready to take on the world," end of quote. According to a close friend of hers, Sarah was smart, outgoing, dedicated to her friends and family. She embodied the words that were tattooed on her body: live, laugh, and love. The day Sarah graduated, she was struck by a drunk driver. That driver was in the country illegally. The alleged drunk driver was Edwin Mejia, and he had a blood alcohol content of 0.241, 3 times the legal limit. The driver was charged with felony motor vehicle homicide and operating a vehicle while intoxicated on February 3. Bail was set at $50,000, but he was only required to put up 10%. So, for a mere $5,000, the drunk driver walked out of jail and into the shadows. As Sarah's father said, after laying his daughter to rest, that, quote, the cost of the bond costs less than the funeral, end of quote. Those are painful words to hear. But what's more frustrating is that the driver should have never been released. When local law enforcement apparently asked the federal government, specifically the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, to take custody of the person, the federal government declined. ICE refused to place a detainer on the driver. An ICE spokesman stated that the agency did not lodge a detainer on the man because his arrest for felony motor vehicle homicide, quote, did not meet ICE's enforcement priorities, end of quote. Now, the Root family must face the consequences of the federal government's inaction while grappling with their daughter's death. It is difficult for the family to have closure since the man is nowhere to be found. It's unknown if he's still in the United States or if he has fled to his home country of Honduras. But this is not an isolated incident. It's business as usual in the Obama administration. Because the administration's policies and carelessness, Sarah Root became another victim. This case shows, once again, that there is a colossal and systematic breakdown of immigration enforcement thanks to the Obama administration's flawed policies and lack of commitment to the rule of law. Unfortunately, a talented young lady whose life was cut short, who didn't have an opportunity to take on the world, is a story too often common. Under President Obama's priority enforcement program, a person in the country illegally will only be detained or removed in a few limited circumstances. Some say that nearly 90,000 undocumented immigrants were released in 2015 thanks to this policy. Secretary Jeh Johnson has claimed that only those that have laid down roots and do not have serious crimes would not be subject to removal. Yet, their words don't match up with their actions. Local law enforcement, such as those in Omaha, Nebraska, have asked the federal government to take custody of certain individuals, but the agency in charge refuses. It hides behind their so-called, quote-unquote, priorities. The president has a constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. The Constitution I just quoted does not say that the President shall make a list of which criminals would be punished or removed and which criminals who may go about their lives. The Obama administration may not agree with the laws that Congress passes, but that has no bearing on its responsibilities to make sure that the laws are faithfully carried out. The administration claims it is well within its constitutional duties under the doctrine of prosecutorial discretion. However, this administration's approach at announcing its priorities and only enforcing the laws on individuals who fall under its priorities is both unusual and obviously an abuse of prosecutorial discretion. This is unusual to prosecutorial discretion because prosecutors do not usually announce their priorities or when they will exercise prosecutorial discretion. A liberal law professor and immigration attorney, Peter Margulis, explained that prosecutors strive, quote, to keep prospective lawbreakers in the dark, end of quote. He explains that if prosecutors' discretion priorities are not kept secret, they, quote, would effectively license the wrongdoing. He then goes on to give an example case of a burglary. He says, quote, if an admitted burglar is youthful and the burglar's take is relatively modest, judges may not wish to sentence an offender to prison and may look with favor on a plea bargain that reflects this sentiment. However, it would be difficult to imagine prosecutors soliciting applications from known burglars for a burglar's holiday that would guarantee a specific period of immunity, end of quote. So, in other words, it is as ridiculous to let people contemplating illegally migrating to the United States know that they will get a pass under certain conditions as it would be to let people contemplating burglary know that they would be let off the hook if they met certain qualifiers. Or consider the drunk driver that killed Sarah Root. What message does this send to people who make a conscious decision to get behind the wheel after drinking? What this case says is that drunk driving, unless convicted, is not a serious enough offense to force removal proceedings. This is moral hazard. Hence, this administration's priority enforcement program is creating a moral hazard and given license to illegal activity. Sarah Root is one of many victims in the past few weeks who died at the hands of undocumented immigrants. In Louisville, Kentucky, Chelsea Hogue was put into a coma when Jose Aguilar, an undocumented person, hit her while driving under the influence of alcohol. ICE issued a detainer and did not take custody of Aguilar, but released him a day later, again because he had no, as they say, no prior significant misdemeanor or felony conviction. Then there's Esmond Pedraz, who had been transferred to ICE in August 2013 after serving time for driving under the influence. However, he was let go on bond because of limited detention space. This is what ICE said at that particular time, quote, due to limited availability of detention space, ICE prioritizes the use of its immigration detention beds for convicted felons, known gang members, and other individuals whose conviction records indicate they pose a likely threat to public safety, end of quote. This is ironic, given that the administration fails to live up to the mandated detention bed limit that Congress sets every year. Now, just a little over 2 years after his drunk driving offense, Pedraza is charged with the murder of his girlfriend, Stacey Aguilar. Then, on March the 8th, an individual illegally present in the United States allegedly murdered 5 people in Kansas and Missouri. The suspect entered the country in 1993, committed a series of crimes, and was removed from the United States in 2004. He attempted to illegally enter again the same month, but was given, quote unquote, voluntary return. However, he returned at some point and continued his criminal ways. The suspect had been arrested and charged with numerous crimes, including communicating a threat with intent to terrorize, battery of a spouse, several driving without a license offenses, a subsequent felony conviction for communicating a threat with intent to terrorize, reportedly based on his threat to kill his wife with a rifle, for which he was sentenced to incarceration for 2 years, 2 arrests for driving under the influence, which produced 1 conviction, and a conviction for domestic battery. On at least 2 occasions, ICE was notified of the suspect, but for various reasons did not take custody of that person. That was a major failure between the Fed and local law enforcement. People are illegally entering the country, being removed, entering again, and committing more crimes. Illegal re-entries are happening because there are no consequences. That is what happened in Kate Steinle's death, and that's why we need to move to what's called Kate's Law. That bill would deter people from illegally re-entering by enhancing penalties and establish new mandatory minimum sentences for certain individuals with previous felony convictions. The Obama administration cannot continue to turn a blind eye to sanctuary communities and ignore those who have broken our laws by illegally crossing the border time and again. How many more people have to die? How many more women like Kate Steinle, Sarah Root, Chelsea Hope, and Stacey Aguilar are going to be taken from their families and friends? The parents of these young women are grieving today, yet their stories fall on deaf ears at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Things have got to change. The president must rethink his policies and must find a way to ensure that criminal immigrants are taken off the street. The Obama administration should try enforcing the law instead of its priorities for the sake of the American people. I yield the floor.